Canada and the United States have long enjoyed a close partnership built on decades of trust, shared values, and one of the world's longest undefended borders. Every day, goods and people flow freely across the border, fueling economies on both sides and supporting millions of jobs. But in early 2025, a new trade dispute has put this relationship to the test, straining the ties that have bound the two nations for generations. What started as a familiar argument over dairy and lumber tariffs has escalated into a broader economic confrontation, with both sides digging in their heels. The U.S. administration, seeking to rebalance trade and address what it sees as long-standing inequities, faces a Canadian government unwilling to back down or compromise on its own economic interests. The conflict has now zeroed in on a critical pressure point: the Alaska Highway, a vital land bridge that connects Alaska to the rest of the United States through Canada's rugged wilderness. British Columbia's plan to impose tolls on American trucks using the highway has sent shockwaves through the region, raising concerns among businesses, truckers, and local communities. This move could cripple supply chains to Alaska, leading to shortages of essential goods and driving up prices for families and businesses alike. It could also trigger further retaliatory measures from other Canadian provinces, escalating the dispute and deepening the rift between the two countries. The Alaska Highway tolls are more than a regional squabble. They're a case study in modern economic nationalism, where local actions can have far-reaching international consequences. For Alaskans and the Canadian provinces that host the highway, the stakes are high, with livelihoods, regional economies, and even cross-border friendships hanging in the balance. This story highlights how quickly partnerships can fray when political rhetoric turns into punitive action, and how fragile even the strongest alliances can become under pressure. As the situation unfolds, the world is watching to see how these two nations, once the closest of allies, navigate this new era of economic conflict and whether cooler heads can ultimately prevail. The current trade friction erupted in March 2025, marking a dramatic escalation in the already tense economic relationship between the United States and Canada. President Trump announced sweeping new tariffs on Canadian goods, specifically targeting the dairy and lumber industries, two sectors vital to Canada's economy and national identity. He cited Canada's high dairy tariffs as a key grievance, declaring that the U.S. would no longer tolerate what he described as unfair trade practices that put American farmers and workers at a disadvantage. Trump threatened a 25% tariff on all Canadian commerce, sending shockwaves through industries and creating deep uncertainty for businesses and workers on both sides of the border. The White House demanded that Canada dismantle its protective measures, warning that failure to comply would result in severe economic consequences and a potential breakdown in cross-border cooperation. In response, Prime Minister Trudeau stood firm, refusing to capitulate to U.S. pressure. He unveiled a package of retaliatory tariffs aimed at key American exports, signaling that Canada would defend its interests. Canada's message was clear: it would not be bullied into concessions that violated long-standing trade agreements or undermined its sovereignty. Public protests and political unity reinforced this stance. This strong federal stance empowered provincial premiers to devise their own countermeasures, escalating the dispute beyond Ottawa and involving regional leaders in the national response. The entire Canadian Federation, not just the federal government, viewed Trump's tariffs as a direct act of economic aggression, sparking a rare sense of unity across provinces. Provinces began leveraging their unique economic strengths, oil, manufacturing, forestry, and more, to push back, making it clear that the pain of this trade war would not be one-sided. The stage was set for a multi-fronted conflict, with both nations bracing for the fallout. Tensions ran high as negotiations stalled and industries prepared for prolonged uncertainty. The unified Canadian response made it clear: this trade war would have consequences for both sides, affecting not just governments but everyday people and communities across North America. In a bold and unprecedented move, British Columbia Premier David Eby announced plans for new legislation that would impose tolls on U.S. commercial trucks traveling the Alaska Highway. This proposal, which quickly made headlines across North America, signaled a dramatic escalation in the ongoing trade tensions between Canada and the United States. The Alaska Highway is a vital lifeline route stretching for over 1,000 miles through British Columbia and the Yukon. It serves as the only overland connection for goods and supplies moving between Alaska and the lower 48 states, making it absolutely essential for commerce, transportation, and daily life in the region. For decades, this highway has been duty-free, a powerful symbol of cross-border cooperation and mutual reliance, reflecting the long-standing partnership between the two nations. But now, EB has called Trump's tariffs an act of economic aggression, describing them as an economic war. He justified the tolls as a necessary countermeasure, a way to defend Canadian interests and send a clear message to Washington. The proposed legislation would act as a deterrent, a tool ready to be activated if U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods actually take effect. Lawmakers in Victoria debated the bill, weighing its potential impact on both sides of the border. No specific toll amounts were announced, but the mere threat of new fees sent shockwaves through Alaskan businesses and consumers. Many worried about rising costs, supply shortages, and the uncertainty of future trade. Alaska's geographic isolation makes it uniquely vulnerable to any disruption. If this crucial artery is blocked or burdened, the consequences could be immediate and severe, affecting everything from grocery shelves to fuel supplies. By targeting the Alaska Highway, British Columbia shifted the dispute from abstract trade policy to a direct, tangible pressure point, one that could be felt by everyday people and businesses alike. The move was calculated and strategic, designed to force the U.S. government to reconsider its aggressive stance and bring both sides back to the negotiating table. The Alaska Highway, once a proud symbol of international friendship and cooperation, now stands at the very center of an escalating trade conflict, its future uncertain. The message from Canada is clear. This country has powerful tools of its own and is fully prepared to use them if necessary to protect its interests and its people. The toll threat is like a loaded gun placed squarely on the negotiating table, a stark warning that the stakes are higher than ever. Both sides now face a high-stakes standoff with real-world consequences as the world watches to see who will blink first in this tense and rapidly evolving dispute. British Columbia's toll plan sparked a wave of coordinated resistance from other provinces. Ontario Premier Doug Ford announced a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S., targeting states reliant on Canadian power. The Yukon joined in, halting purchases of American liquor and restricting U.S. businesses from government contracts. BC also directed government agencies to prioritize Canadian products and banned alcohol from Republican-led states in provincial liquor stores. These actions show a unified grassroots Canadian response, not just a federal one. Each province is leveraging its strengths, transport, energy, procurement, to create pain points for the U.S. The message: Canada's opposition to U.S. tariffs is broad, coordinated, and determined to make the trade war costly for America. For Alaska, the threat of tolls on its only land link is an existential crisis. While most cargo arrives by sea, the highway is crucial for time-sensitive goods and vital equipment. Any disruption would raise prices and create shortages, hitting Alaskans hard. The Alaska Trucking Association warned that tolls would be passed on to consumers, worsening the state's already high cost of living. Governor Mike Dunleavy called for federal intervention, urging cooler heads to prevail. Alaska's leaders stressed the state's unique vulnerability and reliance on Canadian routes for both commerce and defense. Alaskans have no control over U.S. tariff policy, yet they face the most immediate consequences. The situation underscores how deeply intertwined the two nations are and how quickly distant decisions can impact everyday lives. The threat of tolls is powerful, but implementing them is complex. Neither BC nor the Yukon has tolling infrastructure along the remote highway. Building it would require time and investment. However, officials say it's technically feasible. Existing way stations could be adapted for toll collection. Legal challenges loom, as international agreements may guarantee free passage for U.S. traffic. Any toll law would likely face court battles, potentially delaying implementation for years. But the real power lies in the threat itself. By introducing the legislation, BC has created a potent bargaining chip. The goal may be less about collecting tolls and more about forcing the U.S. to the negotiating table. Beyond trucking, British Columbia holds another card: cruise ships. Alaska's tourism industry depends on cruise ships, which must stop in BC ports due to U.S. maritime law. If the dispute escalates, BC could disrupt this traffic, imposing new port fees or creating delays. Such a move would devastate Alaska's tourism sector, crippling small businesses in port towns. The potential impact far exceeds that of highway tolls. This gives BC enormous leverage, a fact not lost on leaders in Alaska or Ottawa. The cruise ship threat is an unspoken warning of how much more damaging the conflict could become. The stakes for Alaska's economy are enormous. Behind the political maneuvering, ordinary people bear the brunt of this trade war. For Alaskans, tolls mean higher grocery bills and more expensive essentials. Supply chain disruptions could delay construction, hurt small businesses, and threaten jobs. On the Canadian side, countermeasures like liquor bans and buy local policies also have costs for consumers. An extended trade war creates uncertainty, stifling investment and growth on both sides. The greatest loss may be the erosion of goodwill between neighbors who have long shared deep ties. When governments clash, it's everyday citizens who pay the price. The human cost of economic conflict is real and immediate. The Canada-US trade dispute, centered on the Alaska Highway, marks a dangerous new chapter for these allies. What began as a tariff spat has become a high-stakes chess match, with entire economies at risk. Canada's coordinated response, tolls, surcharges, procurement bans, shows it won't be pushed around. But these actions risk real pain for Alaskans and could provoke further US retaliation. The path forward is uncertain. Both sides need a diplomatic off-ramp to avoid lasting damage. This conflict is a test of whether old alliances can survive modern economic nationalism. In a trade war of this scale, there are no winners, only varying degrees of loss.